Welcome to Life Stories, where we bring you powerful tales of resilience, courage, and the triumph of the human spirit. Today, we share the story of Jordan Hayes, a man who, despite facing judgment and prejudice, stood tall in the face of adversity. On a flight from Chicago to Miami, he battles a wealthy businessman who tries to belittle him, only to find that his true strength lies in standing firm against ignorance. This is a story about self-worth, perseverance, and the lessons that life teaches us when we least expect it. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's journey. The air at Chicago O'Hare was thick with the usual bustle of travelers, each one navigating the chaos with their own sense of urgency. The sun streamed through the glass windows, casting long shadows across the terminal. People rushed to and fro, luggage in tow, hurrying to catch their flights, eyes glued to their phones or scanning the crowded gates. In the midst of this frenzy stood Jordan Hayes, a man whose calm demeanor and steady steps set him apart from the frantic crowd around him. Jordan was a man who had seen hard times but had never allowed them to define him. His worn leather jacket, faded gray t-shirt, and dark jeans were evidence of years spent beneath the hoods of cars in a humble garage, turning wrenches and working tirelessly. He had built a successful chain of auto repair shops from the ground up, each location a testament to his resilience and grit. As he approached the gate for his flight to Miami, his heart swelled with a rare feeling of accomplishment. This wasn't just another flight. This was a milestone, a symbol of the success he had fought for. When Jordan stepped forward to hand his boarding pass to the gate agent, he did so with pride, his grip firm around the small piece of paper that represented his hard work. The young woman behind the counter smiled at him, offering a nod as she waved him through. He felt the moment settle inside him as he walked toward the jet bridge. It wasn't just about the destination, it was about the journey, the years of sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, and the long hours spent in the garage that had led him to this point. As he stepped aboard the plane, Jordan's mind drifted to the meeting in Miami. He had a chance to meet with a supplier whose deal could take his business to new heights. It was a rare opportunity, and Jordan was determined to make the most of it. For a brief moment, he let himself imagine what it would be like to sink into the plush first-class seat, a cold drink in hand, the world below shrinking away. But the moment was shattered as another passenger, a tall man in a sleek, tailored suit, entered the cabin. This was Nathan Thompson, a businessman with an air of entitlement that was impossible to ignore. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back, and a gold watch gleamed on his wrist as he strolled toward the first-class section like it was his birthright. Jordan had seen men like him before, those who wore their wealth like armor, as though it gave them the right to look down on everyone else. Nathan's eyes narrowed as he took in Jordan's appearance, his lips curling into a faint sneer. Jordan could feel the man's gaze linger on him, assessing him with a judgment that was both subtle and unmistakable. As Nathan passed through the cabin, his eyes flicked over Jordan's worn jacket and scuffed sneakers, a look of disdain crossing his face. It wasn't just an observation, it was a judgment. And in that moment, Jordan felt the weight of it. Jordan could sense that this would not be a quiet flight. There was an undercurrent of tension in the air, a subtle friction that hadn't even fully revealed itself yet. As the plane's engines hummed to life, Nathan settled into his seat beside Jordan, his knees brushing against Jordan's space. The briefest of glances passed between them, and Jordan could feel the charge of something unspoken, something that had yet to manifest but was already hanging heavy in the air. It didn't take long for Nathan to make his move. His voice, laced with mockery, broke the silence. "Guess they're letting anyone into first class these days," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. Jordan kept his gaze forward, pretending not to hear, but the words stung nonetheless. This was the kind of man who thought his wealth made him superior, who believed that the world should bend to his will. But Jordan had learned long ago that silence was often the best response. It wasn't a challenge, not yet, but a simple statement of fact. He belonged here, just as much as Nathan did. As the plane climbed into the sky, Jordan's mind wandered back to the journey that had brought him here. He had built his business from scratch. And every inch of success he had achieved had been earned. The struggle, the sweat, the sleepless nights, all of it had led to this moment. This seat, in this moment, was not a gift. It was a reward for years of hard work. And no one, especially not someone like Nathan, could take that away from him. But Nathan wasn't done yet. He leaned back in his seat, adjusting his cufflinks with the deliberate care of a man who thought he was above the rest of the world. His voice dropped lower, and Jordan could hear the venom in his words as he muttered. "Sure you did. Standards are dropping though. Used to be you could tell who belonged up here." Jordan's fingers curled around the armrest, the leather creaking under his grip. He could feel the heat rising in his chest, the familiar burn of indignation. But he didn't let it show. Not yet. Instead, he let the words roll off him, focusing on the view outside the window as the plane soared higher into the sky. Jordan knew this wasn't going to be a simple flight. Something in the air had shifted, and he could feel the storm brewing between them. He wasn't about to let Nathan's words break him, but he also knew he wasn't just here to endure this kind of treatment. He was here to prove that he belonged, that his success wasn't a fluke, and that no one, not even Nathan, could ever take that away from him. As the hours passed, the tension in the cabin grew palpable, and Jordan understood that the fight had just begun. The flight continued to Miami, but the cabin, once filled with a quiet hum of conversations and the clink of glassware, now felt oppressive. The air between Jordan and Nathan was thick with unspoken animosity. Every time Jordan tried to lean back and relax, Nathan's presence loomed larger, an unwelcome shadow that seemed to follow his every move. It wasn't just the man's words, it was the way he carried himself. Like he owned the entire space, the entire world. Jordan had faced prejudice before. He had learned long ago that no amount of success, no matter how hard-earned, could shield him from the judgments of others. People like Nathan, wealthy, entitled, dismissive, saw Jordan as a threat to their carefully constructed world of privilege. And the more Jordan resisted, the more Nathan seemed determined to poke at him, to make him feel small. "I own a chain of auto repair shops," Jordan said, his voice steady, though the tension in his chest was palpable. 15 locations, built from nothing. Nathan's eyes flickered with disbelief. For a brief moment, his smug expression faltered, and Jordan saw the doubt in his eyes. But it didn't last. With a quick, almost imperceptible shift, Nathan recovered, his smirk returning like an armor. And he muttered under his breath, "Affirmative action handouts. Huh? Gotta love those government boosts for the less fortunate." Jordan felt the words land like a slap. A taunt he had endured far too many times in his life. The assumption that his success was due to charity, not merit, was something he had heard before. Something that had haunted him for years. But he wasn't about to let Nathan win. Not this time. "I didn't get handouts," Jordan shot back, his voice low, his gaze unwavering. "I built my life. What did you inherit?" The question hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. For a split second, Nathan's smirk faltered again, his face flushing a deep red. Jordan could see the rage boiling just beneath the surface. Had he struck a nerve? The idea that Nathan's wealth could be the result of privilege and inheritance, rather than hard work, seemed to unsettle him. Victor, for all his bravado, had never been prepared for someone like Jordan. The words were simple, but they cut through the veneer of confidence that Nathan wore like armor. For just a moment, Jordan could feel the power shifting. He wasn't just a mechanic in a worn jacket. He was a man who had earned his place and wasn't about to let anyone take it away from him. But Nathan wasn't done. His voice, dripping with venom, cut through the air. "I've seen your type before," he muttered. "People who think they can just waltz into places they don't belong." Jordan's hands clenched around the armrest. It was the kind of insult that had become all too familiar. The kind that he had spent his whole life battling against. But instead of reacting in anger, Jordan chose silence. He knew how these encounters went. He had been in enough of them to recognize when someone like Nathan was just baiting him, waiting for him to lose his cool. As the plane continued its steady climb into the sky, Jordan tried to ground himself. The clouds outside the window stretched out like a sea of cotton. Vast and endless. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting the hum of the engines calm his thoughts. He had worked too hard to let a man like Nathan derail him. This flight was a reminder of everything he had built, everything he had fought for. And no matter how much Nathan tried to diminish that, Jordan knew who he was. But as the flight attendants began their rounds, offering drinks and snacks, Jordan knew this was far from over. Nathan wasn't the type to let things go. The air between them crackled with the tension of a battle that had only just begun. Jordan took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a man who had earned every inch of his success. And he wasn't going to let anyone take that away from him. The rest of the flight was a blur of tension, each moment thick with the weight of what had passed between Jordan and Nathan. The air around them seemed to hum with the silent conflict. A battle of wills that neither of them had fully acknowledged but which had become undeniable. Jordan kept his eyes on the window, the horizon slipping past as the plane cruised toward Miami. But in the back of his mind, he knew Nathan wasn't done. He never would be. After a while, Nathan leaned forward in his seat, his eyes narrowing as he scrutinized Jordan with an unsettling intensity. His voice, when it came, was low and calculating, just loud enough for Jordan to hear. "So, you really think you're one of them? Huh? Just another guy trying to ride on the coattails of the elite. Hoping to scrape up a little piece of the pie." Jordan didn't flinch. He could hear the mockery in Nathan's tone, the sneer behind every word. But this time, Jordan didn't let the insult cut him. He knew better now than to play into Nathan's game. Instead, he simply turned his head and met Nathan's eyes, holding his gaze with a quiet, unshakable strength. "Yeah, I do," Jordan said firmly. His voice was steady, despite the storm brewing in his chest. "I earned my place here. I didn't rely on anyone but myself." Nathan's face twisted, his lips curling into an even more pronounced sneer. The truth of Jordan's words hit him harder than he had anticipated. But rather than admit defeat, Nathan doubled down. His eyes flicked to Jordan's worn jacket and scuffed shoes. The same assessment he had passed earlier. As though Jordan's appearance was somehow an indictment of his success. "You're just lucky, you know," Nathan muttered, his voice thick with disdain. "I'm sure you got a nice handout somewhere along the way. Nothing in life worth having comes that easily." Jordan let the words settle around him. Nathan's privilege was on full display now. But Jordan refused to let the man's insecurities poison his sense of self. He had earned everything he had. And that was something no amount of money or elitism could take away from him. But just as Jordan thought the conversation was over, Nathan's next words landed with the force of a brick. "I bet you're thinking I don't belong up here. Huh? That a guy like me doesn't deserve a seat in first class. Right?" His voice carried just enough volume that the people around them began to notice. And Jordan could feel the weight of their eyes on him. The cabin shifted. People murmured among themselves. And the judgment began to seep in. Jordan could hear the whispers, the doubts. It was a subtle shift. But he felt it, like the air had thickened around them. The weight of Nathan's accusation hung in the space between them. The unspoken suggestion that somehow, Jordan's presence in first class was a mistake. A glitch in the system. But this time, Jordan didn't back down. He stood his ground. He didn't just exist in this space. He belonged here. With a quiet breath, he turned to Nathan and said, his voice calm but laced with quiet strength, "I paid for this seat. Same as you." For a moment, Nathan's smug expression faltered, his eyes narrowing, as though trying to recalibrate his attack. But the change was brief. He was relentless, and it was clear he was not going to let Jordan's defiance go unchecked. As the plane leveled off at 35,000 feet, the challenge between them had escalated to something far more than a simple clash of words. It had become a full-on battle for respect and dignity. Jordan felt the weight of Nathan's gaze on him, the subtle taunting, the attempts to belittle him. But he refused to be intimidated. His mind was focused on the future, on the opportunity in Miami that awaited him, on the legacy he was building. This was just one more test. And like every other test he had faced in life, he would pass it on his own terms. Nathan, however, was not about to relent. As the flight attendants made their rounds, serving drinks, Jordan caught the glint in Nathan's eyes. He was watching, waiting for another opening, another chance to land a blow. And Jordan, for all his composure, could feel the tension winding tighter between them. But as the plane sailed through the sky, Jordan understood that the real battle was not with Nathan. It was with the forces that had shaped men like him. Forces that sought to tear people down. To judge them before they even had a chance to prove themselves. And in this moment, Jordan knew that he was stronger than any of that. He wouldn't let Nathan, or anyone else, define him. The game had shifted, but Jordan wasn't done yet. As the plane began its descent toward Miami, the atmosphere inside the cabin was charged with a new energy. The judgment that had once been aimed at Jordan had slowly started to shift. The passengers, who had once turned their eyes toward him with doubt and suspicion, now seemed to watch Nathan with growing disdain. It wasn't just about the seat anymore, it was about respect. About dignity, and about a man standing tall despite the odds stacked against him. Victor, the arrogant businessman, still tried to maintain his smug exterior. But there was a crack in his facade. His once confident demeanor was faltering as the plane neared its landing. Jordan knew this wasn't over. There was still one more fight to be fought. But for the first time during this entire flight, he felt a glimmer of hope. As they touched down at Miami International Airport, the crew and passengers began to stir. But their reactions were no longer the same. Jordan stood tall as he prepared to disembark, his pride intact, knowing that his journey had only just begun. He had fought back, not with anger, but with truth and strength. This flight, full of tension and trials, had taught him that resilience wasn't just about surviving, it was about standing firm. Refusing to let others define you. And in the end, he had shown everyone on that plane exactly who he was. A man who had earned his place. And who wasn't about to let anyone take that away. Thank you for watching this story of courage, perseverance, and truth. If you enjoyed this life story, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that will inspire and move you. Stay tuned for more videos. And remember, your story matters.